Most legal transformation projects start with the wrong question. Which tools are we going to use? This one started differently. Emma Hutchinson is a former senior Crown prosecutor setting up what is, as we know, the UK's first organization focused purely on workplace sexual harassment. Emma wasn't asking for platforms or software. She was asking a harder question. If this scales overnight and my foundations aren't right, will I do more harm than good? And to be clear, this wasn't a software build. This was a consulting partnership focused on strategy, governance, and operational design. And in this interview, we didn't talk about AI with Emma. I asked her about how it was before when she was holding everything in her head and what shifted once this became a structured operating model that she could trust. Let's get into it. Thank you so much, Emma, for doing this. I wanted to ask you if you can tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Emma Hutchinson and I'm a solicitor advocate in England and Wales, and I'm a former senior Crown prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service. I have more recently been in the process of setting up a community interest company that's aimed at tackling sexual harassment in the workplace.
And that's the first of its kind in UK, right?
As far as we don't know of anyone else that's just doing a non-profit specifically focused on sexual harassment in the workplace.
Yeah, and when it comes to setting up something like this, the reality is that probably there's a lot of individuals that are affected and there will be quick scaling, a lot of outreach from the start.
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about individuals affected, this is from statistics, and it's not particularly focused on sexual harassment at work, but just sexual harassment in general in the UK. And 85% of women have been subjected to sexual harassment in their lifetime, and 60% of men. So, and obviously it's not, that doesn't just include work, that stat includes other forms of sexual harassment, but even still it's quite high and significant.
What did you want to do with the CIC? Because I know what you didn't want to do. You didn't want to do workplace investigations, but what did you want to do? How did you want to help people?
The CIC predominantly is going to help people in two ways. One, in people that, really struggling with behaviours in the workplace that are making them feel uncomfortable. They're not quite sure how to navigate it. They're not quite sure whether they're being overly sensitive because other people are seeing it, but nobody's speaking up about it, and everybody seems to be either okay with it or turning a blind eye. Those situations where, you're worrying about work the next day, you're waking up at 3 a.m. thinking, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to go into work, but nobody else seems to have a problem with this behaviour. And it's almost to give support to those individuals so that, if they're Googling in the middle of the night or searching online, in the middle of the night, and not knowing where to go for help or not knowing whether they're on their own and this is just something that they're facing on their own. This is really to signpost them, give them trauma-informed support, equip them with the knowledge they need to help navigate it, essentially. Now, some people will want to, make a formal complaint to their employer, and that's perfectly fine. Other people might just want some moral support. And so that side of the CIC is really aimed at giving support to people, like frontline support. And the idea being that will be offered free of charge, and it's just almost like when you're in a bit of a crisis moment and you don't know whether this is a problem to be worried about, or you don't know where to find sexual harassment specific information on how to address it, or what employers should be doing to address it, or how to navigate speaking up. Give those individuals that kind of information. In relation to the other side of it is obviously, there are lots of very good employers out there that genuinely want to do the right thing. They want to comply with responsibilities that under the legislation, particularly with the changes that came in October last year. They find it quite difficult to navigate. The other side of it is providing support to organisations, to HR managers, or even new leaders in businesses, or even businesses themselves, that basically if they want to get it right, then they're going to be able to utilise our expertise and work with us collaboratively to help them.
I remember in the beginning when we started working together, there were a lot of things in your head.
Yes.
You had quite some worries. Can you talk a little bit about those concerns you had?
So one of my worries is always ensuring that, one, it's a trauma-informed approach, because obviously people dealing with sexual harassment and subjected to it, it's a difficult thing to be the subject of. You don't choose to be on the receiving end of it. And what I didn't want is anything we do to make that bad situation worse. So trauma informed was really fundamental for me. From a CIC compliance perspective, obviously what's super important is ensuring that we get that right, and that will be, complying with data protection laws, complying with the regulatory obligations, just making sure that if we're setting this up, that it's done properly and we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's.
And that was super helpful working with you because you understood the mindset of the individuals that would be reaching out. You had experience. That was very helpful when we were trying to figure out how to go about it, to create some sort of blueprint that would help you in the future. And when it comes to, so that was one part of the concerns. I remember it was specifically around the intake system. How are you going to make sure that the individuals would be comfortable reaching out and reassured that they won't be mishandled? But the other part was also, you had pretty business-oriented concerns. When this blows up, how am I going to be able to keep up with it if we do everything manually, right?
Absolutely, because obviously when you look at the data and the nature of sexual harassment reports that people are subjected to in their lifetime, but also the data in terms of reporting of sexual harassment specifically at work, it's quite high numbers. And, even when I was floating this idea with colleagues and friends, as soon as I say, I'm in the process of, or I'm thinking about setting up a non-profit to do this, I was getting inundated with people going, oh, well, at some point in this job, that happened to me. And even from a lived experience with myself, there's been jobs where I've been made to feel uncomfortable. So I was hearing these stories from everyone, and from both sexes too, so from men and women, in the workplace. And for me, it was super important to ensure that if I'm hearing that, on an anecdotal level, just when I'm floating the idea of what I'm thinking of setting up, that already gave me the insight, coupled with the data that's out there. This is likely to be in huge demand. Once we get started and established and our name gets out there, we are likely to get inundated. And one of my operational business concerns of that is, don't want to start it, put it out there and not be able to support those individuals because we just can't scale fast enough, or we're not ready for scaling, or we're not able to cope with how quick it could blow up on us. And I use the word blow up, but there's probably a more eloquent word I could use there. But yeah, it was that side of it, of going, okay, this could literally snowball overnight, and then we could find ourselves inundated and not be able to keep up with that demand, which, whilst, one, again, more from a trauma-informed side of it, the last thing you want to do is offer to support people and help them, or say there's a service there that can give support and help, and actually not be able to deliver on that. And then they're feeling even worse because they're on their own. So this, part of the service is simply doing something as simple as signposting to the other resources and charities and non-profits or businesses that are out there. It's more educating people as to, how to navigate it, what the options are, how they can expect their employer to approach it, what the ACAS guidance is, those kind of practical ways to navigate it. Because I always think that if you're faced in a situation where you are on the receiving end of unwanted behaviour, or even on the receiving end, for example, of a crime, you don't choose to be a victim or a witness of crime. You end up just finding yourself in these circumstances. And the whole idea behind the CIC is to just help people go, okay, this is where you are. This is the unfortunate situation you're in, but here's the knowledge and the signposting and the tools. And it just makes them feel a little bit less alone and a little bit more empowered to navigate that situation. And as I've said, in a trauma-informed way, so it's not doing any harm. And one of the operational business thought processes behind this is, when it starts, it's likely to snowball really quickly. And I was really concerned and I'm probably a little bit worried about, okay, I don't want to do more harm than good. I don't want to offer something that we can't then scale fast enough to deliver, because that can be more damaging. So I probably spent longer agonising over getting it right and being able to be in a position to scale quick enough with the demand and thinking about all that than most would. But it's more because I know there's so much sexual harassment out there in the workplace that I was really concerned as to making sure that when we are there and able and set up to offer support, that actually we can deliver on that.
You had pretty clear in your head what were the areas that you're going to have to take care of and the areas that are probably going to be the biggest bottlenecks when this scales. You had that pretty much in your head, but what made you decide to go in the beginning for consulting and not immediately for building stuff?
Again, the consulting side of it was more because I wanted us to get it right, and I wanted us to be able to offer services and support and signposting at early stage, as well as be ready so that when we do scale, we're ready to go and there's not a disconnect. And because we're building this from new, and because there's obviously new technology and AI out there, which, you know, can be really, really useful, I wanted to be able to use it in a way that it takes a lot of the what I call legwork, you know, a lot of the mundane work that doesn't necessarily need to be done by a person. It could be done automated using AI. So I wanted to take the best bits of AI and use that with it, and reaching out for support. That was super important just because that's an area of expertise that isn't beyond my knowledge. And it made more sense to engage early on to be able to build it right from the beginning rather than me build it the way I think it could work and then find that down the line we've got problems with scaling or meeting with the demand or even having it done in the right way. So it was more going, okay, if we're going to build something and really want it to work, let's do it right from the beginning rather than trying to unpick how we're working after. And I found it, whilst it's been slow in terms of out of my head, getting things out of my head and thinking of all the things that we need to think about operationally, coming out for consulting and being able to work with you from the get-go has been invaluable, because it's now starting to really take shape, and we know that it can work at the beginning, it can work as we scale, and we know that it doesn't matter how much it scales, we're ready for it. There's systems and processes in there that are automated, that it's not going to be so time consuming. You know, ultimately there's only a small team of us that are establishing this CIC. There's only so many hours in a day. It made sense to use AI to be able to help us with the stuff that doesn't require us, so that then we're freed up to work on the stuff that really does require our knowledge and expertise. And that's where you came in.
And we were talking about this during our working together, how valuable it is that you came to us at a point where you did, because we were able to influence the most and actually design processes, not just trying to fix what is already there and stitch it together. And if I ask you about, if we specify one thing that got much more clear, one process, one area of the CIC that got clearer after working with us?
It was definitely the process of following the intake as to when somebody reaches out, however they reach out to us, whether it's social media, whether it's on the website, however they reach out, what happens after that? Like, where does that information go? Do we need to duplicate that? Do we need to, you know, how do we give the best support? And obviously when people reach out, no case is ever, or no person reaching out is ever going to be the same, because it's all depends on the facts and circumstances of that particular individual. And it was being able to ensure that systems and processes worked for that, of those little nuances on those cases.
I was working on a lot of technically similar projects, but it was really different because when I was talking to you, I started to understand the mindset of the individuals that would be using this flow. So we had to design it a little bit differently. It was quite interesting. I learned a lot from working with you. And
likewise, I learned a lot from working with you from the AI side, for sure.
And can I ask you, we did map out quite some processes, we created a blueprint and we created a roadmap, and in the end, if I ask you, if we remove from that roadmap or the blueprint one thing, and let it not be intake, if we remove one other thing, what is it that you don't want to be without anymore?
In fairness, everything we've worked on together, there's not one thing that I don't want to be without. It's been so invaluable, all of it, that I'm not prepared to be without any of it, because it's been combining my legal brains as well as my life experience and my workplace investigation background. and then you're adding in your AI knowledge and systems and processes and how combined together it works. If you took anything out of the picture as to what you've done, that would then create a whole heap of extra and additional work for me or the CIC team. So yeah, I don't think there's any one thing we could do without in terms of what you've done for us.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that's not nice to hear. So you mentioned that the better part of working together was that we were partnering, we were discussing things, we were learning from one another, and that was reflected in the work we did. How much did that take from you in those couple of weeks that we did that mapping?
I actually was surprised at how efficient it was, because at the beginning I envisaged it was going to be extremely time consuming, and when you're in the thick of it in a busy demanding job, it's difficult to then set that time aside. But actually, when we got together and we're collaborating on it, as I said before, we were both learning from each other and then bringing our skills to the table and our knowledge to the table. And the time went really quickly, but I always felt extremely energized at the end of it, because the progress we were making, not just on the time we were collaborating together, but then you'd got the extra information you needed from me to be able to then go away and do even more work. So for every half an hour I invested of my time, I feel like I got at least 2 hours back. If we're thinking of rewards on it, and it will be more than that once we're launched. That was just, even at that time, getting stuff out of my head, you asking me questions and exploring what we needed, and for that, actually, for then you to go away and run with that and be able to then come back and bring so much more back to the next follow-up meeting was just incredible. It really was.
That was the thing I remembered when we were working together. Ideas were flowing out of your head. We were having troubles noting everything down. How did it feel in the end when you saw all the map that you have in your head actually on a piece of paper and you didn't have to think about it anymore?
Again, I just go back to, it's really incredibly collaborative, and it was as if you just took, like, from the short amount of time we had to spend together and the conversations and discussions we had, and it felt like you just took a photo of what was inside my head and just put it there as a blueprint, which it says something really in terms of how we were collaborating together and how much we were bringing our different skill sets and expertise to the table, and it really worked.
And of course, it's going to be a pleasure working with you in the future, because CIC has now launched. We have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of work to do. And when this scales, we're here to support.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, the work we've done so far has really given me the confidence to be able to use AI responsibly without losing the human touch, and without, obviously, particularly in this side of work for the CIC, the human element is really at the heart of it. But being able to use AI behind the scenes for the automation side to keep us as efficient as possible, particularly as we're a small team, we wouldn't have been able to do that without your input. So I'm so thankful to have used your services, and I can't recommend you enough.
Thanks so much for this. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Thanks so much. And
thank you so much.
Today. Thank you, Emma. What you should take from this is simple. You don't need software to feel in control. You need a mapped operating model that is safe, defensible, and ready to scale before the pressure hits. And that's what we did here, not by adding more tools or building software, but through structured consulting. A couple of weeks of focused mapping turned overwhelm and risk into clarity. And the reality is, every law firm and in-house team handling sensitive workflows is facing the same problems that Emma was. High liability sitting in unstructured processes. Book a consultation call with me using the link below, and we'll give you a foundation you can run tomorrow, with or without automation. Thanks for watching, and see you in the call.